this moment in the Twitter world. Leader Fan Radio Network.
Tweet that.
And KFAN.com. 2 minutes and 21 seconds past 3 o'clock Central Daylight Time. Welcome back. It is a Tuesday edition of the Afternoon Aardvark on a little cooler, a little more presentable, a little more tolerable weekday afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. My name is Dan Barrero. I host the program. Guardsy produces the show. And we are delighted that you are along for today's festivities. Outstanding guest lineup today, which we're going to give you some details about that in just a minute or two. Dan Minnesota, over the years, has done a great job becoming the unofficial sports historian of the Bumper to Bumper program. Helped us really sort of drill down in the calendar of calamity. And also sends out now, he's actually trying to broaden his reach because he's a history guy.
Yeah.
Beyond just the toy department. But he still sends out every day, also something called On This Day in Minnesota sports history. And today, he had so much on the plate, he did what he occasionally does when it's that voluminous. He just sends me, rather than sending it piecemeal via X, he just sends me an email. I think he may include you in some of those too, because there's just so damn many. And today happens to be one of those days. I mean, there's a bunch. 1991, for example, Rod Carew, conducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. 2024, Joe Mauer inducted into the Hall of Fame. You want to go back real far? 1954, the opening round of the PGA Championship was held at the Keller Golf Club in Maplewood. And it kind of goes on with him. 1984, Lester Steckel holds his infamous training camp Ironman competition that left several players injured.
Wow.
The documented winner, Steve Jordan, some felt Jim Gustafson had actually won, but Steckel did not want to award the title to a player that he didn't think was going to make the team. I mean, what a disaster that whole thing was. It just kind of went on and on and on.
Good reminder of how long they used to have training camp.
That's also true.
Back in the day.
Yeah. It was basically, I think it was basically 2 months.
Yeah, could be.
If I'm not mistaken. But then the one that every once in a while I think about, because it's so delicious, and I do envision this story breaking during the X world in which we live, the instant gratification, instant communication. Oh, my God, did you hear about this? Did you read about that? 1988 on this date, Steve Lombardozzi, then a Minnesota Twins second baseman, visits the home of Dan Gladden to quote-unquote finish a discussion.
That's right.
And it erupts into a brawl. Now, he sends also at least the lead of the scoop that was not a Sid Hartman scoop. It was my guy Mark Vansel scoop. Guy who worked he worked in Chicago forever, and he ended up, hitting the gold mine on a Michael Jordan coffee table book that Jordan gave his blessing on. I don't think Vansel has had to work a day since. In fact, I think the last time we had him on, and he's gone on to do other things, but I think last time we had him on was during the documentary. The Last Dance. The Last Dance came out.
Yeah, we had him on a couple of times.
Heavily interviewed, a big part of that documentary. Here's what Vansel wrote on that day. A personality conflict turned into a fist fight, and it nearly cost the Twins a left fielder as Dan Gladden and Steve Lombardozzi settled a simmering feud Thursday, the Star Tribune has learned. The altercation apparently took place at Gladden's home. Lombardozzi arrived for Friday's game against Baltimore with a black eye and scratches down the swollen left side of his face. Gladden's forehead still shows signs of the battle, and he suffered a cracked bone in his right ring finger that threatened to keep him out of the lineup. Gladden cracked a bone near the top of the finger when his fist landed on the left side of Lombardozzi's face. After changing his grip on the bat, Gladden played Friday and Saturday, will remain in the lineup. Unable to get a full swing because of the swollen finger, he has had to choke up almost 2 inches. Neither of the combatants would comment Sunday, although Gladden acknowledged the injury. While Lombardozzi denied any knowledge of the fight, manager Tom Kelly said, and then it's a jump. I don't have it after that. So think about that in today's context. That's kind of scoop breaking.
Well, think about what just happened with Bam and Tyler Hero.
That's true.
It was like a 5-day story.
And that was...
Fairly nothing.
Really was, not relatively speaking. It's ex-teammates at this point.
Yeah.
This is during the baseball season.
Right.
Lombo says, I'm gonna go over to Gladden's house and finish this thing. Now, Lombo was known to have a rather short fuse.
Is that true?
One could say.
Okay.
In fact, I have some recollection. We'd have to look it up. I thought in 87... Did he get pulled late in the game? There's some story about he gets pulled in a game and basically goes crazy in the clubhouse, loses his mind, tears everything up, and then comes back out for the celebration. There's some story swirling around in my head, something like that. By the way, he was a slick fielding,
really good
second baseman. He was not a great hitter, but he was a he occasionally got an important hit, but he was a really good second baseman, but he was a hothead, and Gladden, it's always been that he was Mr. Tough Guy persona. That's been his whole career pretty much. And what I don't remember is what had set the two of them off. How far back it went, what the brawl was. I might text a couple of people and find out, but it at the time, even then, was a hell of a story because the Twins were coming off the world. They won the series. In 88, they were a very good team, if you recall, record-wise, until they weren't. But, yeah, the whole idea of, in this day and age, a teammate goes to the house of another starter on the team.
Yeah.
Another regular player to challenge him, and they're presumably grappling on the lawn. I don't know exactly where that took place. I'm sure I've talked to Gladden over the years about the story.
I think we did,
After the fact, I think we probably have, but it's been a long, long time. But it was part of mythic Twins lore, and in this case is 100% accurate. It really did happen.
I imagine Royce thinks about that like twice a week. Like Royce would be the guy I would text.
That's true.
He would know, and I'm sure they probably talked about it. It reminds me of the scene in Major League when Jake Taylor, the catcher, goes to Roger Dorn's house after he olayed that ball. And what he said to him, there could have been a fight. He came over there to finish a conversation and ended up just being a conversation. But how he ended it as Dorn's wife was walking in with, I think, the cookies, coffee, and lemonade that could have led to fisticuffs if it wasn't such a dramatic way to end it. But maybe that happened in the 80s.
Well, I'm sure it happened in the old days. Louis has over the years told us some stories, stuff that didn't very easily get out. There were even stretches, I think, and writers who felt they almost were willing to protect players and managers into some of those altercations and some of those situations. So I'm sure there's a lot of those stories have never gotten out, but that one did, and it
Dazzle man.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Torrey get into it in the clubhouse? Who was it with? Was it Mornozzi? Yeah. So it's not the last time.
No.
But it's still fairly rare. I think,
Rudy punched Kyle Anderson on the floor.
Yeah, you're right. That's true, too. Yeah.
Things happen.
Things do happen, which does probably have to be remembered from time to time, I guess you could say.
It's a lot of alphas there.
So, yeah, all on this same day. Karuba Hall of Fame, Mauer Hall of Fame, opening round of the PGA going back to 1954. Calvin Griffith in 61 generously agrees to pare down the $500 fine to Zoyo Versailles for leaving the team to get his wife out of Cuba. Very kind of Calvin.
Goodness.
I mentioned the Steckel one.
Imagine that one today.
There's so many outstanding ones. And we don't have Darren Nelson on anymore like we used to. He had all kinds of Lester Steckel stories from back then. And I'm sure Steve Jordan, of course, the father of Cam,
yep,
probably has some rather vivid. Those things I think probably never stop being vivid, right? Fist fights with teammates, stupid like what do they call it in the case of the Vikings contest, the Iron Man contest, players getting injured. You're not going to forget that. This is mythic sports lore, is it not?
It's
all
great
across the
stuff.
board. Yeah,
it's the richness of the stories.
Yeah.
That as the years go on, we've talked about the 30 for 30 we could do on just the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
All the different crazy things that have happened. Every team here, I'm guessing every team everywhere has a version of this, which is why it's fun.
I wonder if there were any neighbors. I mean, Gladden ended up having a farm. I don't know if he did then because he had just gotten here the year before. But I mean, is it, like I said, are there neighbors who are, watching this thing as they fight on the lawn somewhere?
Right. They're excited. A couple of big leaguers are in their neighborhood, and then the next thing you know, there's a brawl.
Yeah. Well, if you go back far enough in the Barrero Menor family saga, there was once a brawl that broke out between two of my uncles on a front lawn. I don't remember what it was over, at 3 a.m.
Deli meat?
No, it was one of the more embarrassing episodes in family history. It wasn't like anybody was, let's go at it. It was like, what are you guys doing? What the hell's going on here?
What are we doing?
Yeah. In any case, let's get our first pause in. I want to remind you, I'm really looking forward to our in-studio visit today, beginning at the top of the 4 o'clock hour, if all goes according to plan. Former Governor Arnie Carlson, he's visiting Minnesota. And he was gracious enough to say, yeah, I'll come in with you. And so we're going to have him for the entire 4 o'clock hour of the show. We're very much looking forward to that visit. I don't know that did we ever have the governor in studio? I want to say we might have.
Not in my time.
Not in your time?
No, I don't think so.
But if we have, it's been a long, long, long time, and it might not have ever taken place. So that's between 4 and 5. We're going to bring Kevin Seifert back in the mix when we come back, because now we're ramping it up again. Now training camp literally is on the calendar right around the corner. So we'll catch up with his shock jock-ish efforts as we talked about yesterday. Thank God for him. He survived another bloodletting at ESPN, right?
Yeah.
Another series of departures, including a couple that we know pretty well. We'll get into that a little bit later, too. But first,
The Fan and BigDeck.com want to give you a shot to win bonus bucks. It's our national cash contest. The first keyword of the afternoon is credit. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword credit.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
This report is sponsored by
early summer, 7 days a week. Includes a program on Sunday called Sunday Sermons. Me and Brett Blakemore scheduled for this Sunday as well. By the way, Danny Minnesota has indeed sent me the rest of the Mark Vancil scoop on the Lombardozzi-Gladden fight back on this day in 1988. And so I'll include some of the juicy details a little bit later in this broadcast. Kevin Seifert, I'm assuming fairly well rested at this point, joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. How many weeks did we give you off? When's the last time you've been out? About a month ago, would you say?
A month, about 5, maybe 5 weeks.
Even 5, okay.
I feel good.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's good to have you. So, you've covered, how many training camps would you say you've covered now? How many years? 30, 40, 50?
I believe this will be 27.
That's a lot. So,
yes,
over the course of that period, have you learned how to is there a regimen you go into to get yourself in shape for training camp? I don't mean physically, I mean mentally.
Well, physically, I probably am always in the best shape of the year right before training camp starts, because the summer is not as busy as the rest of the time of the year, so
True.
we have time to pay attention to our personal selves. But it's good to get away a little bit. I like football enough that I don't feel like I need to close it off entirely. So I've been trying to pay attention to what's been going on, to the extent that anything's been going on the past month or so. And I spent some time thinking about the quarterback situation, how I'm going to approach that, and how I'm going to approach all the other twists and turns we have. And so we'll be ready when it opens up next week.
Okay, that's probably a good place to start, because the temptation is going to be great, I think, to react to every single pass. And yet I think you want to be professional about this and not pretend that every pass might mean anything all that significant. On the other hand, people, as much as people complain about, I'm tired of hearing about it, they're not. They want to hear more. There's not too much that can be written or said about, especially this year, quarterback going into camp. So how do you balance all of that out?
I think what I will try to do is pay as much attention to it as I can, but try to stay away from the personal evaluation. Like, I don't want to try to pretend that I can watch what's happening and produce a nuanced X's and O's breakdown of who was good and who wasn't, because there's so much information in those situations that you don't know, including what the coaches might have done to intentionally make it more difficult or less difficult for one guy or another on a given time, and we all know that happens. So what I will spend my time doing is watching and getting enough information that I know what I want to ask and what I want, not just at press conferences, but behind the scenes as well. And so that ultimately what I can produce and hope to produce is the information that people need to know, not the opinions that they might be seeking in the moment.
Okay. That sounds good in theory. I hope you can hold to it, because there's going to be days where it's going to be hard, because you're going to have all kinds of stuff being hurled at you from other jackals. And I got to believe it's going to be tempting to, lose your mind over 3 straight passes or whatever. Now, on the other hand, I mean, it is fair game. You have to account for every practice, because it is part of the process, of presumably part of the evaluation that the coaches are going to be making.
It is, and you also, with all that said, I don't want to ignore what my eyes are, what's obvious to my eyes and everything else. And Kevin O'Connell even said this at the end of minicamp, that it's possible this thing could get decided pretty quickly. It's possible that it will be very clear from the start who the best guy for this team is, and they won't need to mess around with it for very long. Or it's possible that it could go on for a while. And so the longer it goes, my instinct is to say the longer it goes, the worse that is for the Vikings, but it could also be because 2 guys are playing very well also. And so I don't want to commit to that, but that's how I feel about it. There will be times, and there are always times, when you can't ignore the obvious, and we'll report that, and I won't feel compelled to ask 6 people if what I clearly saw was what I saw. But on the other hand, I don't want to try to project or predict what the conclusions of the people who are watching that and have the actual decisions in their hands are going to be assessing as well.
Are you willing to admit today that the tweet you sent out yesterday was an attempt to remind people that, yes, you're still here? I'm Kevin Seifert. I cover the Vikings. It's coming. Training camp's right around the corner. And so here's a little Molotov cocktail I decided to throw into the middle of the room.
It's funny. Yesterday was my first day officially back on the books, and so I was going through a lot of the emails and a lot of the information and research that we get, and that one jumped out to me right away. And the first thing I thought of was your show, because I knew that you might need some extra football,
yes, I did.
New football data, and you might find a place for that. And so hopefully you did yesterday.
I did.
And today as well. And so I put it out for that reason more than any other. But I admit, I don't know what I would have ranked it just subjectively, but I was a little surprised to see sort of the discrepancy between the top and the bottom of the NFC North projections.
So what we're alleging, or what we're talking about, I should say, is ESPN, I don't know, do we call this analytics? I don't even know what we call this form of research, where they're laying out percentage chance each team, in this case in the NFC North, has to win the division. And you list it as their results are Lions, 38%, Packers, 33%, Bears, 19%, Vikings, 10%. Now, given the fact that most people view this division as pretty deep and maybe not that great a difference between top and bottom, those stats certainly would indicate a very different forecast, correct?
They do, and I should point out that these were not on a limb. I mean, we also have the betting markets are very similar to that as well. ESPN uses DraftKings, and it has the same order: Lions, Packers, Bears, Vikings. Lions plus 180, Packers plus 210, Bears plus 305, Vikings plus 510. And so sort of the same ratio as well, a not insignificant discrepancy between the Lions at number 1 and the Vikings at number 4 in the same order. And so I'm sure we can get into why potentially, both the computers and the less objective analysts are looking at it this way, but that is the way it's being looked at.
So is there a way for you to drill down a little bit on ESPN analytics? Like, what are they putting in the hopper exactly that gets them to those numbers?
I am not privy to their algorithm. I guess it's somewhat proprietary, but I think we can look at a couple things. One, I know I'm pretty sure they look at players in versus players out, and what was the net result in terms of the players who left, the Jonathan Grenards, as of this moment at least, the Harrison Smiths, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, and then the players who came in, whether it's Juwan Jennings and a few others, and obviously the big draft. And so is the net result of players in versus players out make them a better team? Like, I don't know if somebody plugging in those numbers would necessarily find that to be the case. And then the big one is the quarterback, which we've already talked about. But if you made a list of the teams based on the quarterback situation, I don't think anyone. I mean, I would assume 90%, 99% of the people who look at the NFC North quarterbacks right now would put the Vikings at 4th. And you can argue about how good Jared Goff might be, or Caleb Williams, or Jordan Love, but from the outside, at least, the Vikings are in a situation where they don't know who their best quarterback is. Officially, at least, and there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around the league for every team to have one good starter. And so, if the Vikings aren't sure who their one good starter is, then that could be an input, at least, for that projection as well. So, we can, even if we say that it is heavily favored towards Kyler Murray, and you plug Kyler Murray in there, like, how many quarterback situations does that in the NFC North, does that make the Vikings better than? And then I think you're in a really nuanced argument to try to come up with something that tells you that if we knew for sure Kyler Murray was a starter, that the Vikings would have a much better chance than they currently do, according to this projection.
One last quarterback question for today. It's not going to be the last, but it'll be the last for today. I've heard, I may have mentioned this to you before, but I'm going to broaden it out a little bit, because I have listened to first Paul Allen, and then just the other day via Fox 9, the superstar Mike Morris. Both suggest, I think with a straight face, that they believe that this is a 3-quarterback battle and that Carson Wentz should not be ruled out. Is that a bit? Do you think they believe it? And whether they believe it or not, do you believe it?
I'm not sure whether they believe it or not. I have no reason to think that that's on the front burner. Like, you can't, to have a three-way competition. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't even conceive of the logistics of it. So, in order for that to even become a thing, one of those guys would either have to get hurt or be so bad that he drops out, like has to be dropped out of the competition. And I don't anticipate. You never know about injuries, but I don't anticipate from a performance level that happening. And so, the door can't even be open to Carson Wentz in terms of this quarterback competition. Now, do I think he's going to play this year or could play this year? That's an entirely different discussion that could be based on longer-term performance or injuries, or where he ends up on the depth chart, or how this competition goes. But I can't conceive of a practical, logistical way of them having a competition this summer that includes enough input from 3 different quarterbacks that they could somehow decide that Carson Wentz is the best of the 3. That the way I understand the plans for this thing to go. Maybe they have other ideas, but it's enough. It's hard enough to give two guys equal-ish reps with the first team, and how you could do three, I have no idea. And if you can't do that, like, how is he going to end up being the starter absent injury or a total cratering of somebody's performance?
ESPN.com's Kevin Seifert, kind enough to join us this afternoon. You'll be hearing a lot more from him with us, obviously, as we get ever closer to training camp and back into the 2026 season. Although I guess technically, I haven't checked with you. I mean, maybe I shouldn't take you for granted. Maybe that's a bit presumptuous of Guardsy and me to just assume that you're prepared for another year of coverage with us.
I'll find some time in my schedule
Good.
for you.
Appreciate that. Believe it or not, my number one question right now going into camp might not be QB related. I think it is becoming Caleb Banks' availability. Like, I think you wrote about it. I mean, scouts rave about what they think he can be in the NFL if he can stay on the field. They think he could be a game-changing talent in the middle of the defensive line, a place that the Vikings, any team could use it, but the Vikings certainly have been lacking it at times. But what I don't have a good handle on yet is he literally going to start training camp full? Is he on a different schedule? Do we have any sense of the likelihood that if, in other words, that we get to close to the regular season, that he could be the starter on the interior part of the defensive line when we line it up for that opening game against the Bears?
I think this is going to sound weird, but I think it's more likely that he could be a starter in week 1 against the Bears than he will be full on the first day of training camp, if that makes sense.
It does.
I think, even if everything has gone according to plan, which I haven't heard that there's been any hiccups, they may not know that until he actually reports to camp. But assuming that there haven't been, he still hasn't done. It's hard for me to imagine they would go for him doing nothing from the entire spring. He did no OTAs, no mini camp, none of that, to the day 1 of training camp doing full all football. And again, this is not the first day of training camp in 1975 in full pads, but it's still a lot of football activity and a lot more. So based on how they typically have addressed these, it wouldn't be surprising if he is, they work him in, but whether that to me is like almost what I'm anticipating. We'll see how that eventually works out. But I think if all systems are go, that there is a wide lane there for him to take one of those starting jobs and to run with it as soon as he's, from a football conditioning standpoint, ready to do it.
The most strenuous training camp you ever covered, who was the coach?
The first year, I remember the first year of Brad Childress, where he's setting a tone, and it's not like Mike Tice, who preceded him, had soft training camps by any sense or any stretch of the imagination. Like, they went hard, and he encouraged emotional physicality, and there were lots of fights and all that kind of thing. But that very first year of Brad Childress, there were some rules that exist now, but not nearly as many. And they were doing the very first one. I remember it was pouring rain, like to the point where you probably couldn't see in front of you. Like, you say, like, they should be able to practice in the rain. This wasn't just rain. This was like a deluge, and people were just soaked to the bone at the end of the practice. And it just went from there, where there was full pads after full pads, and then a lot of, full drills where it's actually tackling people to the ground, and which you never see anymore. And there was a lot of that, and a lot of guys were super sore and rolling their eyes and not happy about it. But that one in particular, it's from another era almost. It wasn't really that long ago. That would have been the 2006 season.
Yeah.
But that, I recall that one being especially intentional in terms of what Childress was trying to impart to the team in his first camp. It was much different the second year, and to the point where I joked with him that he was running a Club Med compared to the first year, which he didn't like, and I understand that, and probably wasn't the smartest thing to say to the head coach, but it just kind of came out.
Yeah.
But regardless, that one in particular. I'm sure there were some others. I was never there for a full Mike Zimmer training camp, so I can't really say for sure on that one. But that one, that 06 summer was particularly brutal. You can ask Chad Greenway about it one day, probably.
Yeah, I think I've heard him talk about it before. And of course, you weren't there for the infamous 1984 Les Steckel drill sergeant training camp. We mentioned earlier, today's the anniversary of when he had the Ironman competition. Again, training camp went on a lot longer then, and several players ended up injured as a result.
Yeah.
Imagine yourself having to cover that circus.
I mean, like, now that would be a fireable offense to get your players hurt in training camp, and like you'd be kicking yourself for doing it in the first place. It doesn't do you any good. You need them in the regular season. And so, was that the same year as the trip to Arizona for the bonding experience?
No, that was the bonding. That Pecos River. That was after Steckel. Is that the one you're talking about?
Oh, okay.
That was when the team actually had some talent. I think Bernsey was coaching then. That was a Mike Lynn. Although Mike Lynn did hire Steckel too, much to the shall we say anger and hurt of Jerry Burns, right? Because it almost felt like he was supposed to be the heir apparent. No, Pecos River was a little bit later, although it also made for very good copy. And it's another one of those periods that will live in Minnesota Vikings infamy, that's for sure. So is it basically, in terms of Harrison Smith's situation, is it literally because of his status and his stature, he can decide whenever he wants? I mean, is that how it's kind of set up, do you think? Or do you think a decision actually has already been made, but it just hasn't been announced?
If the decision was he's coming back, I think we probably would have heard that. Mm-hmm. But he also hasn't announced his retirement either. And so, there's no rule that says you have to announce anything ever. But I think that the Vikings, even if you look at last year, he didn't do most of training camp because of his personal health issue, and eventually worked himself back and had a pretty good season. And so I don't think the Vikings view training camp as like a red line for him whatsoever. I don't know how he feels about it, honestly, whether he thinks he needs camp or not. But I think if on the week before the first game of the season, if Harrison Smith called and said, I want to play, I don't think they would say no. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I don't know that, but I'm not aware of any red lines that they have about, they have to know from him at a certain point or they're moving on because they want him back. So there's no reason to move on. And when you're talking about a player of his caliber and his experience and responsibility in terms of knowing whether he's in football shape or not, I'm sure that they don't view that as a necessary thing. So I don't think, I could hang up with you and find out in 10 minutes that he's coming back or retiring, but I don't think that the Vikings are holding any deadline over his head or anything along those lines.
Let me finish today with a field conditions question, because I feel like this is an area you have had to report on in the past, along with officials, referees, etc. As you, I'm sure, know, NFL players noticed that World Cup, every match was played on grass. So there's a lot of this momentum from players to say, well, that tells me it's all doable if the owners would just be willing to pay the money to get it done. Is it as simple as that? Is there any reason to believe that the owners might budge on that? Or is it, especially in some of these multi-purpose stadiums, a little more complex given other concerts, other things happen in these stadiums, which I would assume have some impact on the grass question? Where are we on all that, do you think, after the World Cup?
Right. And a couple of years ago, me and a few colleagues at ESPN did a deep dive on this and just looked at all the issues involved. And you're right. First of all, NFL owners don't own all of the stadiums, including US Bank Stadium. It's owned by the local commission that was set up by the original stadium agreement, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to make revenues, to be able to pay bonds and all those sort of things. And so as you know, US Bank Stadium is used for tons of stuff. And even if they could come up with a way, and I'm sure they could, to have grass in a cold environment or to ship it in every week or whatever they would do to have it indoors at US Bank, that would still add a level of complication to all the other things that they would be trying to do. And so, there is a price that you could pay to have grass in every NFL stadium. But who would be paying that? The owners aren't, I don't sense that the owners feel like they have any, other than the players' personal preferences, that the injury data isn't very dramatic one way or the other. It's hard to imagine talking to a player who would prefer to play on turf, but that's been the case for a long time, and it hasn't budged NFL owners to this point. And there's still like the World Cup thing, that happened, and there's just some differences between having a 3 weeks or 5 weeks of soccer games on a grass field with soccer players as opposed to 8 or 10 NFL games with football players. I mean, that tears the grass up a little bit differently. But again, there is an amount of money that could cover all of those things. But from a practical sense, it's not a problem that it appears as though NFL owners want to solve, and the stadium owners aren't really incentivized to do it. They're incentivized to have a surface that they can use as often and as easily and as cheaply as they can. And so I don't know whatever that price is, and again, there is a price to make it work, I don't know where that would be coming from.
I was heartened that you finally came to your senses about replay as it pertains to one of your tweets calling for the removal of the VAR system.
Well, I may or may not have tweeted that just because I can't remember. Wasn't it a play where the American player got the red card off of VAR, and so from a personal standpoint, I was rooting against it. So that was my unironic tweet.
Okay.
On that. So I can't say I'm against VAR, but I was in that moment, so I thought it was funny.
Lastly, and on a serious note, because this stuff isn't funny, because it's people's livelihoods are involved, another series of layoffs at ESPN. Fortunately, you're not a part of that, but, this stuff is everywhere. It really is. iHeart, we just had another deal on this, so it makes you feel for the people who are no longer in positions, who've lost their positions, and you have to feel, grateful every time you're sitting there still having a chance to do the job you like to do.
It really is. That's very well said. And we should point out it's in a lot of industries too. It's not just in media. Absolutely. It's not just in communications. There's so many industries where people are waking up every day and finding out that the job that they committed their professional lives to is no longer available to them. And, it sounds, you don't want to say it's a fact of life but it is. And you just say thanks that you're not involved in it at that particular time, and you reach out to the people who were and offer to do whatever you can to help them. We will see you at training camp. It's now we can feel it, right? Absolutely. It's right around the corner. Not quite as close as the state fair, but that's irrelevant to me. I've given up that issue with you. I've conceded. Good. You won. You beat me on that one, and so you'll never have to worry about me ever mocking you again about that subject unless I change my mind. But he'll never get to see Weird Al at the grandstand. That's true. One of the great venues in the Twin Cities. Guess what? I've already seen him there before, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. Okay, you got all the answers. Yeah, of course you do. Clayton from Rochester, chances of getting purified water at Vikings training camp based on ripping analytics. Guardsy, 30%. Seifert, 20%. Dan, 10%. So yeah. So hopefully the 17-year-old security people will be spared your wrath this year on that. We can only hope. Thank you. Okay. Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. Good to catch up with him, and we will talk to him, I'm sure, first day we're out at training camp, if not sooner. Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barreiro on
was an infamous I was about to say Billy Martin fight with Dave Boswell, but in the case of Billy Martin, you don't even have to narrow it down that much. I think he had a fight. I think there was an anniversary just within the last 2 weeks, according to Dan Minnesota, of a fight between Billy Martin and the traveling secretary, I think at the time was Howard Fox. Billy Martin could get into it with anybody.
Seems like it.
And pretty much everybody. That's for sure. 651 guy noting that Martin was manager that year. He beat the hell out of Boswell, caused him to have 20 stitches. Martin had 7. Boswell was a star starting pitcher. I was 10 years old. I bet Sid had some good insights. Now, I did get, as I mentioned earlier, sent the rest of the Vansel scoop on the Lombardozzi-Gladden fight on this date in 1988. But it's locked me out. It's one of the things you have, I think, the newspapers.com thing.
The archives.
It unfortunately locked me out when I clicked on the link after a few minutes for whatever reason. So if we find a way for me to get back to that, it does seem to confirm a situation where Lombardozzi gets pulled, and in this case he doesn't trash the clubhouse, but he goes to the clubhouse, and Gladden was bitter that he was back there sulking, thought he still should have been around the team and around the dugout, and that was some of the... And, Gladden was never shy about his views on that. There was an infamous quote at the time from Andy MacPhail. Of course, he was a general manager back then. And MacPhail basically said, look, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. It's 2 grown men settling it. And that got blowback. It's Minnesota, Garzi. So as you know, that would get blowback. Oh, grown men do that, huh? That's how they settle their differences? Is that the message you want to send to little Garzi in Edina, Minnesota? That's the way you settle things, by fighting on a front lawn?
It was a matter between individuals, and they're both grown boys.
There it is,
I think if you think you can head stuff like this off, that's the wrong assumption.
He's right. MacPhail's right about that.
TK said 2 men had a disagreement, and they settled it like men. It's done. It's over with.
Yeah.
My understanding is that everything's hunky-dory. It's probably better it happened.
It was one of those situations where you say, there's no need to be this literal. It really doesn't. I don't think there was any effort to say there's larger meaning to the approach. This is how you should settle every sort of issue. I will add, though, in Lombo's defense, he lost his second base position in '88
to Tommy Herr.
It's the infamous Tommy Herr trade for Tom Brunansky that, in theory, made sense because Tommy Herr was a very good hitter, too. But as the story goes, Tommy Herr didn't want to be here at all, wanted to stay in St. Louis. He sulked the whole time he was here. That trade ended up being a disaster. And, looking back on it, even though I remember endorsing it at the time because of what Tommy Herr represented on paper, it really didn't work out all that well. The Twins might have been better served not trying so hard to fill that particular position because... the stories were basically he was blubbering by the time he got to the clubhouse. It was almost like the Andrew Lang story, the old Minnesota Timberwolves center who tried to flunk his physical after he got traded here for Leitner because he didn't want to be here. And
every story has a story.
What's that?
Every story has a story with the other team.
It's true.
You know what I mean? They all have a parallel.
A parallel for sure. And it was the same with Tommy Herr. He wasn't particularly beloved in the clubhouse. He never really fit in to, sort of the Twins. There's Heat culture. Back then, there was something called Twins culture.
Here's more TK.
Okay.
You don't want to see it, but that's the end of it. They're back to getting along. Yeah. They had a problem. They resolved it. They patted each other on the back the other night, and things seem to be fine. When the game's over, they're probably not going to go out and eat together, but on the field is what I'm concerned with. Yeah. It's something they had to get done, and it probably had to get done in their particular way. Maybe it's for the best that this is the way. It's the whole idea of sort
of clearing the air. It's okay. We got to puncture the tension. Now, there was also somebody who had handed me a quote from Gladden. Again, there's so many texts that are coming in. It's not allowing me to go really anywhere earlier than 3:28. And it came in before that. I should have started. And it was a quote where Gladden basically said, well, I was inside the house playing dolls with my 2 daughters. We weren't playing Army because I had 2 daughters who like to play with dolls, and that's what I was doing. There's a knock on the door, and it's Lombo, and I say, do you want to come in?
Yeah.
And Lombo says, no, I want to come out here to settle things. and that was the Gladden version of what took place.
It's funny now. I remember whenever we talked, maybe we talked about it last year on this anniversary because Minnesota just sent us both. That Gladden part of it was from the Rob Deere podcast. Gladden told the story. That's why we knew. That's why we remember.
That's right, yeah.
Within the last year. It just came out about a year and a half ago, this podcast. And there's Dazzleman. I love it. He's telling the story. It's great.
One of the great interviews I ever had in baseball after he used to despise me, challenged me to I've told the story before, to take batting practice before a game because I seem to think I know so bleeping much about how to play baseball. We somehow went from that to having a really good professional relationship, and he ended up being an incredibly marvelous source for us, too. Does that door opening mean our guest might be here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's even better.
Somebody let him in. He found his way in. That's brilliant.
Outstanding. Let's take a top-of-the-hour pause. The timing is perfect. We are going to be, I think, delighted to be joined in studio for the next hour by former Minnesota Governor Arnie Carlson stopping by to see us. Let's get a quick pause in, and we will chat with the governor next.
You're listening to Barrera.